We scheduled a meeting for the next morning at 10 a.m., in person. He insisted it would be better that way. His formal tone and respectful manner only made me more uneasy. Something about that call confirmed what I already suspected. Raphael had left something important behind. And it wasn't just money. I hung up and sat at the edge of the bed, trying to gather my thoughts. There was no way of knowing what awaited me, but the mere existence of a plan gave me breath. Raphael had thought of me all the way to the end. He knew who I was dealing with, and somehow, even in absence, he tried to protect me. That night, I avoided the kitchen. I didn't want to cross paths with my mother or my sister. The smell of baked lasagna drifted through the hallway, and, for a moment, I felt a wave of anger. How could they carry on like nothing had happened? How could they sit down to a family dinner while I was unraveling from the inside? I went back to my room, locked the door, and stayed there, curled up with the folder. Not like someone hiding a secret, but like someone clinging to an anchor. I tried to sleep, but it didn't come. In my mind, Raphael's face blended with the sound of the lawyer's voice. I wondered what else he had done without telling me, and why. That was so like him, always putting others first. He used to say my heart was too big, that I let people hurt me because of it. Maybe he knew that if something ever happened to him, I'd be completely alone. And he was right. It was almost 2 a.m. when I pulled out an old notebook and began to write. Something I hadn't done in years. I poured everything onto the page. The pain, the frustration, the abandonment. But also, the gratitude. Because even in death, Raphael was still the only one who truly cared. The only one who saw my pain. I fell asleep with the notebook open on my lap, eyes heavy, soul slightly less suffocated. The next day would bring answers. Maybe not all of them. Maybe not the ones I wanted. But I was ready to know. And more than anything, ready to act. The sky was gray when I left the house. The heavy clouds felt like they mirrored my mood. I walked to the taxi stand without saying a word to anyone. My mother glanced at me from the kitchen but didn't ask where I was going. She just went back to slicing fruit for breakfast. My sister was still asleep, probably surrounded by the birthday gifts from the night before, the way she always had been since she was a teenager. Nothing seemed to have changed for them. But for me, everything had. The lawyer's office was downtown, inside an old building with a grand facade. When I arrived, a receptionist led me to a room with tall windows and shelves packed with books. The air smelled like aged wood and paper long tucked away. There was something solemn about the place, as if every piece of furniture was guarding secrets. Dr. Vicente came in a few minutes later. A tall man, silver hair, steady eyes, and a calm voice. He greeted me respectfully without overdoing it. Then he gestured for me to sit, and after a brief silence, opened a folder that looked strikingly similar to the one Raphael had left me. Before anything else, he began, please allow me to express my condolences again. Raphael was not just a client. He was a friend, very organized, very thoughtful. He came to me about a year ago, wanting to set certain things in order. He wanted to make sure that, if anything ever happened to him, you would be protected, and he did so with remarkable clarity. I said nothing, just listened. My hands were clasped tightly in my lap, squeezing each other, trying to keep the nerves at bay. Raphael prepared a will, Dr. Vicente said. He left very specific instructions for it to be read formally, with all involved parties present. But before that, he asked me to give you something in private. He reached into the folder and pulled out a sealed envelope with my name written, in Raphael's handwriting. I opened it slowly. Inside, a letter. It felt like hearing his voice again. My love, if you're reading this, it means my time came sooner than we imagined. I know your heart is broken, and I wish more than anything that I could be there to hold you. But I've prepared some things, because I knew if I were gone, you'd be left alone. And more than that, I knew your family wouldn't protect you. You've always put everyone else first. Now, It's your turn to be cared for. I fought back the tears and kept reading. Don't fall for sweet words from people who always turn their backs on you. Listen to what Vicente has to show you. I planned it all, even this moment, so that for once they would see who you truly are, strong, fair, and so much more than they've ever given you credit for. When I finished, Dr. Vicente was still waiting, patient, silent. Then he opened the folder and showed me documents I never could have imagined existed. Rafael had investments I didn't know about, bank accounts in my name, properties recently acquired, all carefully arranged for me. But what shocked me most were the legal clauses. He had written restrictive provisions that excluded every other family member. Nothing that belonged to him could be accessed by anyone else. And beyond that, he had left strict instructions regarding the reading of the will. My mother, my sister, and one additional relative had to be present, and it all had to happen within 7 days. I left the law office in silence. The city kept moving, unaware of the truth I had just uncovered. But something inside me had shifted. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I held a weapon in my hands. I wasn't just a forgotten piece of my family anymore. Rafael had given me a voice, and with it, I was going to write a new story. Not one of grief alone, but one of truth. Going back home after that meeting felt like returning to the scene of a crime no one had bothered to investigate. Same house, same fake flower smell, same indifference, but I was no longer numb. Now, I knew what was coming, and that gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks: control. For the first time since Rafael's death, I knew there was a plan. And it wasn't one my family had written. My mother was sitting in the living room, flipping through a magazine while watching a variety show. When she saw me, she said nothing. Just gave me a glance, the kind you give a stranger walking past. My sister came down the stairs laughing on the phone, her voice loud and cheery, like our recent tragedy was some distant memory. I'm booking brunch with the girls on Saturday. We need to celebrate my birthday again. This time somewhere classy, she said, brushing past me like I was invisible. I tasted bitterness in my mouth. Rafael's funeral hadn't even happened yet. His body had just been released that morning, and while I was alone, making arrangements for his final goodbye, they were already planning a new party. The contrast was grotesque, almost surreal. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. The silence in there was different. It wasn't empty. It was thick with resolve. I called the funeral home, confirmed the time, sent messages to the few friends Rafael still had. Most had drifted away in recent months, the kind of slow fade that happens when marriage pulls you into a smaller world. But I knew a few would come, because Rafael was loved, and he deserved to be remembered with dignity. The next day, the chapel was simple: white flowers, a smiling photo of him placed above the closed casket. I chose not to open it. I wanted people to remember him the way he was: alive, whole, warm. Only a few people came: an old college friend, 2 co-workers, and a distant cousin who drove in from another town. No one from my family showed up. Later, when I returned home, I found my mother setting the table with champagne flutes. "We had a quick toast," she said, "just to not let the weekend go by uncelebrated. Your sister wanted to raise a glass one more time. You know how lively she is." I took a deep breath. I didn't answer. I just went upstairs and locked the door behind me. With every gesture they made, the distance between us widened. I wasn't just mourning Rafael's death. I was mourning the death of an illusion. The illusion that I had ever truly belonged to that family. That night, I looked in the mirror and saw a woman I barely recognized. A woman who had loved deeply, lost tragically, and been forgotten by her own mother, but also a woman who still carried the final message of a man who loved her. "Now it's your turn." I picked up the phone and called Dr. Vicente. I told him I agreed to proceed with Rafael's will exactly as he had planned. He confirmed that formal invitations would be sent soon, legally required. They would have to be there. For the first time, my mother and sister would be forced to listen. And it wouldn't just be any conversation. It would be Raphael's voice, speaking from beyond the grave. In that cold, quiet law office, truths would rise, and their celebration, it was about to end. 2 days after the funeral, the doorbell rang early in the morning. I already knew what it was. At this point, the punctuality of Dr. Vicente's office didn't surprise me. I watched through the window as the delivery man handed 2 white envelopes, sealed with gold, into my mother's hands. She furrowed her brow, glanced at the sender, and called for my sister, who came down the stairs barefoot, holding a mug of coffee. "It's from that lawyer. Weird. Think it has something to do with Raphael?" I heard my mother murmur as she tore open the seal in a hurry. I closed my bedroom door gently, without a sound. I didn't want a confrontation. Not yet. I knew that envelope was more than just official paper. It was the beginning of their discomfort, the first crack in the carefully polished surface of calm they worked so hard to maintain. Downstairs, the silence after they read it said everything. My sister, always quick to mock anything serious, said nothing. My mother, always so skilled at downplaying tension, stood still, the envelope still in her hand. The date and location were clear. Saturday, 3 p.m., at the office of Dr. Vicente Noguera. Subject, formal reading of the last will and testament. Of Rafael Duarte. A few hours later, I heard my sister's voice on the phone, sharp and frustrated. "What do you mean he left a will? And why do we have to go? This is so bizarre. I swear, this has Clara written all over it." Yes, it did. Or rather, it had his signature all over it. Raphael, who even in death could still shake their world, still pull the rug out from under their feet. At dinner, my mother finally looked me in the eye. "We got the invitation. I was surprised. I didn't know Raphael was the type of man to leave such formal arrangements." "Raphael was more prepared than people gave him credit for," I said, without lifting my eyes from my plate. "And you knew about this?" my sister asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "He trusted me." That's all I said. The silence that followed wasn't like before. It wasn't neglect. It wasn't absence. It was suspicion. For the first time, they were wondering what Raphael might have left behind. And for the first time, his presence, even in death, was the center of that house. In the days that followed, something shifted. My mother began making discreet phone calls, asking around about legal procedures related to inheritance. My sister started watching me more closely, like she was trying to decode an old riddle. But neither of them dared speak to me directly about it. The idea that something was out of their control made them uneasy, and strangely, that gave me a quiet sense of justice. On Friday evening, I got a call from Dr. Vicente confirming that everyone had RSVP'd. The will would be read just as Raphael had formally requested, in the presence of all named parties, and he made it very clear no clause could be altered, contested, or postponed. "This will be a delicate moment, Clara," he said. "Be prepared. What Raphael left behind is significant, and he was very specific about who deserved what." I thanked him and hung up. Then lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling. My heart was racing, but not from fear. It was something else, something unfamiliar. Anticipation, as if, finally, my pain was about to be seen, as if Raphael, even in silence, was about to return the place I'd been denied my entire life. The next day, my family would be forced to listen. Every word, no interruptions, no scoffing laughter, no party to drown out the grief. The moment of reckoning had come, and I would be there, standing whole with Raphael's memory by my side. Because some truths only gain power when spoken at the right time. And that time had arrived. The clock read 2:45 p.m. when I arrived at the office. The sky was overcast again, as if the weather had decided to match the weight of what was about to unfold. Dr. Vicente was already waiting for me in the lobby, wearing the same gray suit from our last meeting. His expression was calm, serious, his quiet attention strangely comforting. "They arrived a few minutes ago," he said softly. "They're in the conference room. We can go in whenever you're ready." I took a deep breath. I was ready. We walked in together, The room was spacious, with a large solid wood table in the center. Tall curtains filtered the afternoon light, casting a dramatic, almost theatrical dimness over the space. Sitting side by side were my mother and my sister. They looked up when I entered, but neither said a word. The tension in the air was thick. You could feel it in your skin. I sat at the opposite end of the table, directly across from them. Dr. Vicente took the seat at the head of the table. He placed a black folder down, opened it carefully, and pulled out a sealed envelope. This is the last will and testament of Rafael Duarte, registered 11 months ago. It was prepared with full awareness and legal witnesses. As per the deceased's request, it will be read in full in the presence of the mentioned parties. No interruptions or objections will be allowed until the reading is complete. Is that clear? Both of them nodded silently. I kept my gaze steady, unmoving. He broke the seal and began, I, Rafael Duarte, declare this to be my final will and testament as a true reflection of my intentions. I write these words with clarity and conviction. My wife, Clara Duarte, is the only person I trust completely, and it is to her that I leave, both in life and beyond, everything I have built. My sister shifted in her seat. My mother's brow tightened. I leave to Clara all of my assets, movable and immovable, investments, bank accounts, policies, and any financial rights that may be discovered after my death. In addition, I include a non-transferable protection clause against third-party claims preventing any attempt of contestation by members of her family or mine, with legal penalties for any such challenge. The silence in the room was no longer just tense. It was cutting, loud in its disbelief, shock, and simmering rage. But Dr. Vicente continued reading, his tone steady, unwavering. I also declare that my decision is based on direct observation. Clara has lived under emotional invisibility within her own family. She was never treated with fairness, never truly supported. In the years I spent with her, I witnessed her relentless effort to be a good daughter, a good sister, a good wife. And I saw how all of that was dismissed. My choice, then, is also a gesture of reparation. Clara deserves peace. She deserves to be seen. And she deserves justice. I held my composure. But inside, I was shaking. Dr. Vicente paused, then continued. Nothing I leave behind is more valuable than the love we shared. But love alone isn't always enough to shield someone from the world's coldness. So I did what I could to protect you. Clara, this is how I'll keep taking care of you, even when my arms can't reach you anymore. He closed the envelope. The silence that followed lingered for several seconds, until my mother stood up slowly. This is unbelievable, she whispered, almost breathless. No, it's just the truth, I replied. My sister stared at the floor. For once, she had nothing to say. For once, she was tasting what I had felt for years, invisibility. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about financial inheritance. It was a mirror. And nobody likes what they see when truth stares back. But unlike them, I didn't need to run. The drive back home was silent. Neither my mother nor my sister spoke a single word. They were shaken, visibly so, but too proud to show any open anger. And their silence was the dangerous kind, the kind that simmers with held-back fury. I knew this wasn't over. As soon as we got home, my mother went straight to her bedroom. She shut the door without looking at me. My sister, on the other hand, stayed in the living room, pacing like a caged animal. Her eyes held rage, disbelief, and something I had never seen from her before: fear. For the first time, she wasn't in control. You knew all of this? She finally asked, voice sharp and strained. Rafael trusted me. He did what he believed was right. Right? He turned his back on us, left everything to you, like we were nothing. I've spent my whole life feeling like nothing. Now you know how it tastes. She stared at me long and hard, then smirked. This isn't over. Count on that. She stormed up the stairs, her footsteps loud and angry, slamming her door behind her. I took a deep breath. There she was, the sister I knew, the one who couldn't stand not being the center of everything, the one who'd always had it all without effort. She had no idea how to handle loss. especially not the loss of something she thought was hers by default. The next morning, I was woken by the doorbell. A man in a suit, holding a black folder, handed me a legal notice. My mother was formally contesting the will. She claimed Raphael had been emotionally unstable in his final months, that he had acted under undue influence, and that everything needed to be reviewed in court. I sat on the couch holding the document. I wasn't surprised. I'd seen it coming. What hurt wasn't the attempt to erase Raphael's final wishes. It was knowing that my own mother was willing to attack me in court over something that never belonged to her in the first place. That paper wasn't just a lawsuit. It was her final choice between me and what she considered family entitlement. I called Dr. Vicente right away. He answered with the same calm tone as always. Clara, everything is within expectations. Raphael foresaw this. The will was executed with full legal safeguards. We have expert evaluations, witnesses, records. It's going to be exhausting, but not impossible. We'll respond formally and protect your position. They're going to come after me with everything they've got. But now you have something to stand on. And more importantly, you have a reason to move forward. This isn't just about money. It's about respect, about justice, about one final act of love. I hung up the phone and stood there for a long time, staring out the window. Outside, the street moved along like any other day, as if nothing had changed. But inside me, everything had. The silent war had begun, and I wasn't backing down. That afternoon, I received a message from a distant cousin, someone I barely spoke to. She had heard about the will and wanted to congratulate me. She said she had always admired my quiet strength. That even though I was often overlooked at family gatherings, I was the most genuine one there. Her message moved me more than I expected. It was the first spark of support in the middle of a desert. Maybe not everyone was against me. Maybe truth really was starting to find its way. I closed my eyes for a moment. Raphael, even in absence, was still here. In every unfolding event, in every step I took. And even though the road ahead would be difficult, I knew now. I wouldn't be walking it alone. His strength was now mine. And what was at stake wasn't just a legal document, it was my story. And for the first time, I was the one writing it. That night, something inside me wouldn't let me sleep. The lawyer's words echoed in my mind, right along with the court notice I had left sitting on the table. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the image of my mother signing that document, cold, deliberate, as if she wasn't my mother at all. And maybe, for the first time, I was starting to accept maybe she never really had been. I got out of bed in the middle of the night, driven by a strange restlessness. I walked over to the closet, pulled over a chair, and reached up to the highest shelf. There, buried behind boxes of old memories, was one I hadn't touched in years, an old dusty shoebox. Raphael had packed it carefully when we moved into the house I grew up in. I remember asking him what was inside. He smiled and said, "It's part of your story. One day, you'll understand." I sat on the floor with the box in my lap. The house was completely still. I opened the lid with trembling hands. Inside were letters. So many letters. All written by me. Letters I had written as a teenager and never sent. Confessions of loneliness, of feeling forgotten, of always being the one in the background. Letters I had hidden away so no one would know how I really felt. I had no idea Raphael had found them, let alone that he had saved them. I began to read, one by one. In one, I wrote about my 15th birthday, the one where my mom forgot to bake me a cake because my sister had made it to the finals of a dance competition. In another, I talked about crying in the school bathroom because no one from my family had come to watch me sing in the school recital. The same recital where my sister showed up with a poster for her friend. Every letter reopened a wound. But at the same time, each one was a confirmation. I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't imagining things. I really had spent my whole life in the background of someone else's spotlight. At the bottom of the box, there was a white envelope. Inside, a note from Raphael. "Clara, I found these letters before I asked you to marry me. I read every single one. I cried for you. and I made a promise to myself. I would do everything in my power to make sure you never felt that way again. If you're reading this now, it means I failed to stay by your side. But my promise still stands. Use this as strength. Not for revenge, but to remember who you are. You are light, even when they try to put you out. That note shattered something inside me, but not into weak, broken pieces. It shattered me only to rebuild, layer by layer, a version of Clara I thought I had lost. I no longer needed validation from that house. I didn't need to prove anything to my mother or my sister. I was enough. Raphael had seen that in me, even when I couldn't see it myself. And now, he had left me the greatest gift of all. The recognition of who I was, who I am, and who I have the power to become. I closed the box gently, like sealing away something sacred. It wasn't just a shoebox, it was a testament to my pain, my past, and my strength. I got up off the floor, with something new coursing through me. It wasn't anger, it was clarity. The next day, I contacted Dr. Vicente and gave him permission to use a portion of Raphael's letter in our legal defense against the challenge. There would be no room for doubt, not from him, and not from me. My mother's attempt to void the will would now face something she never understood. Real emotion. She might not believe in the value of love, but it had been written, signed, and preserved. And in that moment, it was more powerful than any property or asset. It was proof that I had been truly loved. The following morning, when I went downstairs, I found my mother at the kitchen table sipping her coffee like nothing was happening. That was her default posture, pretending everything was normal while the world collapsed around her. But this time, I saw it for what it was. And for the first time, it didn't affect me. She looked up from the newspaper and asked coldly, "Can we talk?" I sat across from her. My hands were steady. My gaze didn't flinch. "Do you want to talk?" I asked. "Or do you want to justify what you did?" She paused. Just for a second, then sighed, like someone about to put on a performance. "I just thought it wasn't fair. Your father worked for years to build that. Your sister has worked so hard lately, and suddenly you get everything, like you're the only one who mattered." "Raphael didn't divide an inheritance," I replied. "He left what was his to the person he loved. This isn't about effort. It's about who truly stood by his side." She tightened her grip on the coffee cup, didn't say a word. She knew that anything she said might let something slip, something she'd been hiding for years. She never saw me as her equal. I was the useful daughter, the quiet one, the one who never caused trouble. And because of that, I was always the one who could be overlooked. "You can appeal it. You can spend as much as you want on lawyers. You can go around saying I was unfair. But the truth is recorded now. And it doesn't need your version anymore." Right then, my sister walked into the kitchen in workout clothes, phone in hand, clearly on her way out. She glanced at us and frowned. "Are you two still talking about that? Seriously? Let it go already." "Oh, we're letting it go, all right," I said, standing up. "You're just used to everything being about you." She scoffed, but there was bitterness in it. "Good luck with the pressure," she sneered. "You have no idea what it's like when all that's in your name. You'll find out it's not all sunshine and roses." "I'd rather carry the weight of responsibility," I said, turning to leave, "than keep living as if I didn't exist." Later, that day at Dr. Vicente's office, I signed the final documents that officially transferred Raphael's estate to me. Everything according to the terms he had laid out. The attorney handed me a folder with the official records, a notarized copy of the will, and a flash drive. "These are the audio recordings of Raphael's sessions during our meetings," he said. "He asked us to keep them secured. If anything was ever contested, these recordings could be used." I tucked the flash drive away without opening it. Just knowing he had thought of that was another layer of his protection. Raphael had anticipated everything, but more than anything, he had anticipated my loneliness. As I stepped out of the law office, an elderly woman was waiting on the sidewalk. It was Mrs. Nade, my childhood neighbor. She'd lived in the house next door for decades. She'd been a close friend of my grandmother's. "Clara, can I give you a hug?" I nodded, surprised. She hugged me tightly, like someone pouring warmth straight from the soul. "I've seen everything that's happened. I always knew you were the strongest. Your mother never saw it, but Raphael did. And now the world sees it too." Her words cut straight to the heart. Recognition was showing up in unexpected places. Support was appearing on forgotten faces. Yes, the story was being rewritten, but not with shouts or slamming doors, with quiet gestures of truth. I walked home that evening with a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't victory, it was dignity. And it was finally mine. In the days that followed the official transfer of the estate, the house was swallowed in a thick, heavy silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that screams, the kind that reveals everything no one dares to say out loud. The routine became restrained. My mother didn't speak a word to me. My sister walked past me like I was a wall. And me? I was calm, steady. I was in no rush. Time was finally on my side. The inheritance was still new. But the real change had already started, inside me. I felt more present in my own skin, less uncertain, less afraid. Even in his absence, Raphael had left me a kind of armor, one made of love, recognition, and trust. And that was worth more than anything on paper. At the end of that week, I received my first piece of mail with my name as the legal owner of one of the inherited properties. It was a small apartment in the neighborhood where Raphael grew up, a place he'd always loved. The moment I saw the document, I knew that property wasn't chosen at random. It was a message, a space he'd saved for me, maybe as a symbol of a new beginning. That night, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I made dinner. Not for them, for me. I cooked rice, beans, sautéed vegetables, and baked Raphael's favorite garlic herb bread. It was the kind of gesture he cherished, simple, intimate, full of meaning. I set the table for 3. No announcement, no invitation. I just prepared it and waited. At exactly 7 p.m., my mother appeared in the Euphrates hallway, drawn by the smell. She paused at the kitchen door, clearly caught off guard. "Is all this for you?" she asked. "It's for anyone who wants to sit down without pretending," I answered, without looking up. My sister came in a few moments later. She looked at the table with suspicion, arms crossed, assessing it like a trap. But even with pride bruised and eyes wary, she sat. My mother hesitated for a second longer, then followed. We ate in silence. The meal was simple, but every bite seemed to cut through invisible layers of unresolved years. I wasn't expecting apologies. I wasn't expecting gratitude. That dinner wasn't a reconciliation. It was a reality check. For the first time, we were at the same table, and they couldn't ignore me. When we finished, my mother gently pushed her plate forward, dabbed her lips with a napkin, and said without emotion, "You always knew how to make good rice." That was it. No mention of the will. No mention of the legal battle. But I understood. Coming from her, that was as close to recognition as I was going to get. My sister didn't say a word. She just got up and left the room. But something in her eyes had shifted. It wasn't disdain anymore. It was caution. After they went upstairs, I stayed in the kitchen alone. I washed the dishes slowly, with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long, long time. That quiet act, preparing a meal, had been my way of saying I wasn't trying to win. I wasn't a threat. I simply existed. And for the first time, they had to see me. I went back to my room and sat on the bed with Raphael's folder in my lap. I picked up one of the letters he'd left, still sealed. He had written several, each with a different title. The one I chose that night was called when you start to doubt. I opened it and read, Clara, if you ever find yourself wondering whether you did the right thing, remember this table. Remember who sat down, even without saying a word, because they could no longer ignore your presence. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. Sometimes truth is most unsettling when spoken in silence. That's why I entrusted everything to you. I closed the letter, tears welling in my eyes. Even in absence, Raphael still knew exactly what to say. And in that moment, I knew. The justice I'd been searching for wasn't about revenge. It was about being seen. And slowly, that was happening. Not because they wanted it, but because I could no longer be erased. The weekend arrived quietly. The atmosphere in the house remained tense, but controlled. Our interactions, when they happened, were short, measured. No one mentioned the will. No one brought up the hearing date for the challenge. But the silence said everything. And I had learned how to hear what was never said. That Saturday afternoon, I did something I had never done before. I formally invited my mother and sister to dinner. I wrote the invitation by hand and slipped it under their doors. No explanations, no apologies. Just one simple sentence. Tonight at 8 p.m. Dining room. That evening, I set the table carefully. I used the china that had been sitting untouched. For years on the top shelf, the kind my mother only brought out for important guests. I placed 3 candles at the center of the table and served a dish Raphael had taught me to make, homemade gnocchi with fresh tomato sauce. He always said it was a healing dish, like a hug for your stomach. At exactly 8 p.m., they both showed up. My mother wore a blue blouse I hadn't seen in ages. My sister had her hair tied back, something she almost never did. They sat in silence, and I served the plates. We began to eat in a kind of neutral quiet. It was my mother who broke the silence, her voice guarded. Is there something you want to say to us? There is, I said. I want to tell you who Raphael really was. The version you never knew. They glanced at each other, clearly, caught off guard. I continued. Raphael was more than just my husband. He was my mirror. For the first time in my life, someone really saw me. He read my pain. He found my hidden letters. He understood my silence. And he still chose to stay. You never asked how I felt. You never asked what I dreamed of. You never wondered why I was so quiet. But he did. He listened. My mother let out a slow sigh and folded her arms. My sister kept her eyes locked on her plate. He didn't leave everything to me out of spite. He did it because he knew I never got anything from you. Not love, not attention. And he wanted in some way to even the scale. My sister scoffed and finally looked up. So what is this supposed to be? A morality lecture? A pity party? No, I said calmly. This is just my truth. And tonight, for the first time, I'm saying it out loud. I don't need you to accept it. I just need you to hear it. My mother stayed silent. She lowered her gaze, as if searching for answers in the folds of her napkin. I spent my life trying to please everyone. I tried to be helpful, understanding, available. And every effort I made was invisible, overshadowed by the perfect daughter. I was never celebrated, only remembered when I could be useful. Raphael saw that, and he refused to repeat your mistake. I stood up, walked to the sideboard, and placed an envelope on the table. Inside was a copy of Raphael's letter titled, When You Start to Doubt. They looked at it but didn't reach for it. This letter explains better than I ever could how he felt. If you want to understand, read it. If you don't, throw it away. I don't need your approval anymore. But I thought, you deserved to know. Without waiting for a response, I began clearing the plates. They both remained seated, silent. The air between us was heavy, weighted. But there was no anger in me, only closure. The end of a cycle of silence, denial, and worn-out attempts. When I finished washing the dishes, I returned to the dining room. Only the envelope was left on the table. Opened, the letter still inside. Someone had read it. I'll never know who. But that was enough. I went upstairs, lay down on my bed, and closed my eyes. I hadn't won anything that night. No battles, no arguments, but I had won myself. For the first time, I had been my own voice. And that voice, finally, had been heard. I woke up Sunday morning with a lightness in my head. For the first time in years, the weight was gone, that pressure in my chest to prove myself, to earn space. The dinner the night before had been, for me, a silent turning point. Not because it brought closure or peace, but because it freed me from needing either. I spoke. And in that house, speaking was a revolution. I went down to the kitchen and made my own coffee. Slowly, without rush. My mother passed by in the hallway. She didn't say a word, but her eyes, they looked different. Less hard, still proud maybe, but mixed with something that looked like uncertainty. Or maybe respect. My sister never came downstairs. I wasn't surprised. She was always the kind of person who knew how to make noise, but never knew how to deal with silence. And in that house now, silence was on my side. Later that afternoon, I went to the apartment Raphael had left me. I took the key from my bag and opened the door gently, like I was touching a memory. The place was clean, organized, minimally furnished, all chosen by him. A bookshelf lined with his favorite books, a simple couch, a soft floor lamp in the corner. It was modest, but it breathed his essence. Every detail carried the calm and care he brought into even the smallest gestures. I sat on the couch and exhaled slowly. In that space, I felt something new. The freedom to begin again, not as an escape, but as a choice. For the first time, I had somewhere to build my life, on my own terms, and most importantly, with dignity. I pulled out my phone and started making a list. Moving. Dates, paperwork, new utility accounts, light repairs. But it wasn't just about leaving my mother's house. It was about stepping out of the role I'd been cast in since I was a child. The quiet daughter. The one who waits to be noticed. Waits to be heard, waits to be loved. I didn't want to wait anymore. That version of me was staying behind, in that quiet decision to begin again. Before I left, I opened the nightstand drawer. Inside, I found a letter. Another one. From Raphael. He'd left a note for me at that address, as if he knew I'd only return when I was ready. If you've made it here, it's because you finally started seeing yourself clearly. This place is yours, Clara, not just because of the keys, but because of the freedom it represents. Build, begin again, write your story however you want, and please, don't wait anymore. I tucked the letter into my pocket, stepped outside, and locked the door behind me, this time with a new feeling. Resolution. That night, I told my mother I'd be leaving the house soon, that I was moving into the apartment Raphael had left me. Her response was quiet, almost expected. You do what you think is best. I always have, I replied. But this time, I won't be asking for permission. My sister stood in the kitchen doorway, overhearing the conversation. She didn't say a word, but her silence said everything. The structure that had always upheld favoritism, manipulation, and silent power plays was cracking. And I no longer needed to hold it up. I went back to my room and began packing. Not hurried, but purposeful. Each folded item was a chosen memory. Each object, a piece of myself I was taking with me. For the first time, I wasn't running away. I was going somewhere. Toward me. And then, I remembered something Raphael used to say whenever I hesitated in front of life. What's holding you back, Clara, isn't a lack of support. It's the belief that you need it in order to begin. That night, I slept with my suitcase open beside the bed. It wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something new. And this time, I wasn't waiting for anyone's permission to live. On the day I finally decided to leave my mother's house, the sky was clear, a rare break from the endless gray that had colored that chapter of my life. It felt symbolic. The sunlight streamed through the windows without asking for permission, as if time itself was pushing me forward. I woke up before my alarm, not out of anxiety, but out of peace. I took a long shower, dressed slowly in the outfit Raphael had always loved most, a beige linen blouse and dark pants, and zipped up my suitcase with the certainty of someone bringing only what truly mattered. I didn't take everything. I left behind what no longer belonged to me. Memories that weighed me down, silences that cut too deep, and roles that were never really mine to play. My mother was in the kitchen when I came downstairs. She looked up for a brief second, but said nothing. Sitting with a cup in her hands, she seemed smaller than I remembered. There was something tired in her face, like part of her had finally surrendered. Maybe not to regret, but to the realization that she no longer controlled this story. I walked over and stood by the table. I'm leaving. The apartment's ready. I'm starting a new chapter. She nodded, took a sip of coffee and murmured, Raphael did a lot for you. And I did a lot for you. You just never noticed. It's not that we didn't notice, she said, still staring out the window. We just never knew how to handle you. You were different, too quiet, too strong. And you mistook that for absence. She didn't reply. We sat in silence for a moment longer. Then I stepped away. There was nothing left to say. This wasn't the kind of goodbye that needed a speech. It was a crossing of waters. Her life would remain there. Mine was taking a new path. My sister appeared in the hallway, backpack slung over one shoulder. She was heading out, as usual, avoiding anything that didn't center around her. She stopped when she saw me. For a moment, I thought she might speak, but she didn't. She just raised an eyebrow slightly and kept walking. Good luck with your papers, she muttered as she passed. Good luck with your mirrors, I replied. I closed the living room door gently behind me. Outside, the taxi was already waiting. I got in and took a deep breath. The house faded in the rearview mirror, growing smaller and smaller. And with it, everything that had once made me believe I wasn't enough. When I arrived at the apartment, there was a small flower on the table, a white orchid in a glass vase. The doorman said it had been delivered days earlier, along with a card. Of course it was from Raphael. The card read only one line. Now you're exactly where you've always belonged, on your own path. I held the flower gently in my hands, and for a moment, warmth flooded my chest. A quiet kind of cry came, not from pain, but from relief. Even from the other side, Raphael still knew exactly when to show up. I spent the day setting up my new space. I stacked books on the shelves, hung up a few framed photos, folded clothes neatly into drawers. All of it slow, deliberate, like planting roots. That evening I made tea, opened the window in the living room, and sat on the floor watching the street below. Life was moving down there. And for the first time, so was I. The goodbye didn't hurt the way I expected it to, because it wasn't a break. It was a rebirth. I wasn't leaving. I was finally arriving. It had been a few weeks since I left my mother's house. Time didn't erase the scars, but it began to give them shape. Each day in that new apartment helped me realize that the true inheritance Raphael left me had nothing to do with assets, property, or legal documents. It was courage. Courage to exist outside the shadow of others. Courage to listen to myself, to respect myself, to emotionally support myself, without waiting for the validation that never came. I no longer woke up afraid. No more walking on eggshells in a house where every step I took was watched, judged, or ignored. Now, I could breathe. I slept with the windows open, letting the sounds of the city drift in, reminding me the world still had space for me. The lawsuit my mother filed didn't go anywhere. The judge upheld the will, clear, legitimate, incontestable. Raphael's attorney, calm and resolute, presented the evidence, audio recordings, medical records, and testimonies. Everything was in order. And even if they tried to appeal, they knew they couldn't win. The defeat was quiet. No phone calls. No threats, just silence, the kind that follows the acceptance of an undeniable truth. One Sunday morning, I went to the cemetery. I brought with me the same white orchid I'd received the day I moved out. It had started to wilt, but I wanted to leave it there, as a symbol of everything that had blossomed in me since that day. I sat beside Raphael's grave in silence for a while. "You knew exactly what you were doing, didn't you?" I whispered, eyes on the ground. "And even now, I'm still amazed by how you managed to love me beyond your own absence." I didn't wait for an answer. I knew it wouldn't come. But something inside me quieted. A peace not from the outside, but from deep within. From someone who, for the first time, knew who she was. I went home and sat at the table with a brand new notebook. Raphael had read the secret letters I wrote long ago. Now I was writing a new one, this time to myself. "Clara, today you are the woman who survived every silence, who stood when the ground gave out, who turned grief into rebirth, abandonment, into presence, invisibility, into existence. Today, you don't write to be seen. You write because you have a voice. And because that voice is yours." I closed the notebook with a small but genuine smile. The house was quiet, but this time, the silence felt warm, not imposed. A silence that said, "You are home." And it wasn't just the physical home. It was my body, my heart, my story. I was in me, fully. In the days that followed, I began working on an idea that had been circling in my mind, to turn my letters and experiences into something bigger. A book, maybe. A way to show that stories like mine, though painful, aren't rare, and that there is always a path forward, even when everything seems to collapse. I got a message from a distant cousin saying that my story was making its way through the family, that for the first time, they were seeing me differently. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I no longer lived to impress the people who spent their whole lives pretending I wasn't there. On the fridge door, I stuck a simple note, my own kind of will. "I leave to myself the freedom to be who I am, the strength I found in chaos, and the right to begin again, as many times as necessary. This, no one can contest." I closed the door and stepped out onto the street with a certainty I had never known before. The will that mattered most wasn't the one Raphael left behind. It was the one I wrote, this time, signed by me. This isn't just the story of a woman betrayed by her own blood. It's the journey of someone who dared to raise her voice in a place where silence was the rule. Clara didn't seek revenge through shouting or hatred. She took her revenge by living, by claiming her existence, by rebuilding her dignity, and proving that a person's true worth doesn't come from how much they please others, but from how much they endure without losing their essence. While the party carried on next to her grief, she cried alone. But every tear fell like a seed into solid ground, and when no one expected it anymore, she bloomed. Raphael may be gone, but what he left behind was greater than any inheritance. The courage to no longer accept the role of being invisible. The power to rewrite her own story even after so many pages had been torn out. If Clara walks alone today, it's not because she was left behind. It's because she finally realized she didn't need to be carried to be strong. The woman who once asked for help in silence now walks in peace, because she discovered that her voice is the most valuable legacy anyone could ever leave, and no one can take that away from her.